Chapter 101 Monsters in Masks. POV Max Draco. Location, New York. A few days later. You know we might be on the verge of being invaded by a bunch of fish people, but man do we get a lot of free time, I said as Jean and I sat outside a cafe. Jean, no point in going to school if it might be a target, she said drinking her tea. What do you think is going to happen? She asked and I shrugged. If I had to guess, the United Nations is going to give a counteroffer to try to apprise this Namer guy and avoid an armed conflict with an unknown force, I said. Ever since I had taken information from Atuma's mind, the whole thing with Atlantic was more of an annoyance than anything. From Atuma I learned that this was just a power play by Namer to get the surface world to give him territory that didn't belong to him, giving him the right to conquer the rest of the Atlantic Ocean and other underwater cities. Atuma saw the writing on the wall and bent his knee in exchange for a position of power in Namer's kingdom and other benefits. Jean, well, I'm glad to hear one of us believes that, she said, and I leaned forward and held her hand. Everything going to be fine. Let's talk about something else, like what's going on with Scott and Rouge, I said, getting a confused look from Jean. Jean, what do you mean? I haven't heard anything, she said, and I raised an eyebrow. Are you seriously you don't see it? I asked, sipping my coffee, and Jean shrugged. Jean, see what? She asked, and I was about to reply when a woman and a kid were running past, only to fall to the group. Hey, are you okay? I shouted, getting up and helping the two, but before anything else could be said a multitude of shouts caused me to turn and come face to face with a large group of angry civilians. Get away from her, kid, a large man said, holding a bat. She's a mutant and so is her freak of a child, a woman yelled, causing many of those in the cafe to back away from the mother and child. Mother, please, we've done nothing wrong dash, she began to say, only to flinch back as a stone was thrown at her, which I caught and almost crushed in my hand. A part of me wanted to vaporize the group, but I held back and helped the two get to their feet and was able to see the kid's hidden face. He had red scale skin and eyes, solid blue glass-like eyes with fins on his face, and I immediately recognized him as Squid Boy, a possible future X-Man. Get out of here, I said, and the woman nodded, thanking me as the two ran. The mob tried to chase after them, but a glare and a quick blast of Dragon's aura shut that shit down fast. The mob quickly dissipated after that, and I sat back down, now only noticing the look of pure wonder on Jean's face. Jean, that was amazing, Max, she said, and I shrugged. Just being a good Samaritan, nothing more, nothing less, I said, and after a while of getting a few side eyes from other patrons, we left the cafe. Jean, how were you not scared? She asked, and again I shrugged, knowing none of those people could hurt me. If any of them did hurt me, I would fill charges and take all of them for what they're worth, I said, a smile on my face. Jean shook her head and held back a laugh. After a while, I brought her back home, but not before getting a kiss goodbye as I drove back to my penthouse. Opening the door, I saw my other self and waved before teleporting to Nighthawk Island, and immediately I am met with mayhem as Artnix chases Tommy and Jason around the couch and through the halls of the base. Artnix, get back here you two, she shouted as Tommy and Jason giggled and laughed while running away from their enraged sister. Looking around, I see Luna watching the four dragons Agumen and Gabuman watch the two DG eggs in their incubators like a hawk. Luna, mind filling me in on what happened? I asked, and she nodded and pointed at a wet spot on the ground and a bucket. Luna, brothers put water bucket on door, splashed big sis, she explained simply, and I sweat dropped at the information. Sigh, of course they did, I said, holding my head in my hands when I heard a familiar thwip and the scream of two boys caught and now in trouble. Walking out to see what happened, I first see Tommy and Jason both stuck to the wall covered in silk webbing, Artnix looking less than pleased at the two. Both, we're sorry, they say, and Artnix nods, helping them both down. Only then did the three notice me standing there. I'm glad to see you guys are having fun without me, I said, and was immediately tackled by Jason, Tommy, and Artnix, who forgot about what her brothers did. Tommy, what are we doing today, Papa? He asked excitedly. Jason, what are we going to play, hide and seek, tag, or maybe a new game? He asked, and I smiled at the two. Nope, today you get to join me and Artnix for training, I said, causing the two boys to look at me with confused looks. 10 minutes later. Tommy, this is awesome, he said, gliding in the air with his new armor. Jason, thank you, thank you, thank you, he repeated as he glided past me and Artnix, as we also are armor. Items. Item: Scaldron armor. Gives plus 15 STR and plus 20 dex. Swim speed x2. Water damage is refused by January 3rd. Item: Razor whip armor. Gives plus 10 STR and plus 25 dex. Retractable arm blades. Jason wore the dark blue armor of the Scaldron while Tommy wore the dark gray razor whip armor. Artnix, remember you guys aren't flying, so turn dash bam dot ahead of time, she finished as we watched Tommy slam into a tree. Tommy, I'm okay, he yelled from a tree branch, only for it to break and for him to fall to the ground. Less okay, he said, and I held back a chuckle. Jason/Artnix, laughing. Walking over and helping him up, I gave him a healing potion he drank while glaring at his laughing siblings. I patted him on the back. Come on, your training is just beginning, I said, and bringing them all together. First you're going to watch your sister, then Tommy, then you Jason, I said, teleporting us to the training room. Artnix walked into the training room while I took Tommy and Jason into the observation room and watched as Artnix fought against different types of soldiers in different environments. Using the Light Fury's armor's natural ability to turn invisible to get the advantage on her opponents, Tommy and Jason watched with undivided attention. All right Tommy, it's your turn, I said, and he looked at me like I had splashed cold water on him as he switched with his sister. The first map was a forest and Tommy had to take out 10 soldiers. At first he tried stealth but quickly found he either was not a natural at it unlike his sister, but to be fair Gamera isn't known for his stealth. This simulation soldier quickly spotted him and started to open fire, peppering Tommy's hiding spots and cover as he retreated. Jason, why doesn't he just set the forest on fire with his breath? He asked and I didn't even get a chance to answer. Artnix, would you be able to stop the fire you started once it's spread? She asked and Jason shook his head in understanding. Tommy continued to run and I watched as he got out of the eyesight of the soldiers and after a moment caught his breath and looked down at himself, then realization appeared on his face and a wicked grin. I think he just realized he's bulletproof, I thought, and that was confirmed a moment later as Tommy bull rushed the troops not even caring about stealth, and beat the soldiers until they stopped moving. The next training environment was a desert and Tommy immediately charged the soldiers, but this time using his arm blades to end the fight faster. The third and last environment was a warehouse in the city, but to our surprise intended of busting through the front door. He busted through a wall and quickly took down the soldiers, ending the simulation. Good job Tommy, you can come out. All right, it's your turn Jason, I said, and he nodded, but I could tell he was nervous as he passed by Tommy, who sat down in the observation room. Jason got the same 3 environments as his brother, but unlike his brother was competent in stealth, easily hiding in each environment by hiding in unexpected places. But unlike his sister after he who liked to stay in stealth until caught, Jason after he left the shadows preferred to stay in the fight and push his advantage like his brother. Decided to see how well they work together, so I sent all 3 in to train but upped the difficulty. Immediately Artnix took control much to my surprise as she led the boys and came up with a strategy for Tommy being a distraction as Jason and she dealt with everyone else. They work well together. Far better than I expected, I thought, watching the 3 wreak havoc. Tommy and Jason decided to transform into their young monster forms, which ended the fight almost immediately. I let the 3 go through multiple environments together and they kept surprising me again with how well they worked together, trusting each other without a second thought. What are you going to test them with next? More soldiers? I thought about it for a second before a smile grew on my face. POV Artnix. Jason, I wonder what we're going to fight next, he said excitedly. Tommy, whatever it will, beat it like all the other tests, he said confidently. Just be ready for anything, I said, ignoring the bad feeling Tommy's words just made me feel when suddenly the environment around us changed to that of an open grassland with a few trees and rolling hills. We looked around, listening and enhancing our senses for the group of soldiers, but after a few moments, we looked at each other. Jason, did something happen? Where are dash? He began to say, only for our senses to blare a warning as we jumped away. Crash boom. Quickly getting up and turning around, standing in the newly created creator was Papa, wearing his Night Fury armor with black wings and tail extended. He slowly looked at us. Night Fury, so you guys ready for your final test for today, he said. Chapter 102, A King's Work. POV Artnix. Night Fury, so you guys ready for your final test for today, he asked, and the question stretched out on the now air of the training room. Tommy, heck yeah, let's do this, he shouted, and that only caused me to become even more confused. Did Tommy just actually say that? I asked myself, but his next action confirmed it as he charged Papa, and Papa met that charge head on. Night Fury, not bad, but you need to grow up more before you can go against me, he told Tommy as he flung him to the side, then blue flames enveloped him. Looking to the right, I saw Jason's helmet off, spewing a torrent of blue flames at Father. Following his lead, I raised my hands and dark energy gathered and I fired multiple times. Boom 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 boom. Night Fury, when you're bombarding your opponent, make sure they are still there, he said, standing behind Jason. He just has a moment to realize what had happened before Father blasted him away and into Tommy, who was just about to get up, sending them both to the ground. Night Fury, I think that's enough for now. How about you, Artnix? He asked, and I nodded as he threw me a bottle of red liquid and took 2 more to my brother, who struggles to get up. I wonder if I'll ever be that strong, I thought, drinking the red liquid. It tasted like watermelon and I felt all my tiredness disappear. POV, Night Fury. I gave each a bottle of healing and I couldn't help but chuckle as the boys immediately wanted to continue training. Tommy, can we fight giant robots? Asked enthusiastically. Jason, maybe we should keep fighting soldier first, he said, and Tommy looked at him with a bored look. Tommy, they're boring too, let's fight something that we can beat. That's a challenge, he said, crossing his arms. And you think you can beat a sentinel? I asked, and Tommy nodded vigorously while Jason looked at his brother with a stare. Jason, Father takes on an army of them for training and you think we can beat them when we can't even hurt him? He asked, and Tommy looked less sure for a second. Artnix, we can beat one, she said, and looked at me, and I nodded. Sure, if you guys want to try, I said, and the training room created the giant robot. Are you sure this is a good idea? They have already exceeded my expectations. Besides, it'll stop it if things get hairy, I thought as I stepped back and let the 3 go for it. Tommy and Jason immediately changed into their monster forms, and I was surprised at how big each had grown as they were both the size of a large car. Artnix had stayed in her human form and fired Dark Pulse at a distance while Tommy and Jason tried to tear the robot apart. And after a few tries, the 3 found their flow. Tommy and Jason tore apart the leg armor and Artnix blasted apart the exposed machine, toppling the sentinel. I watched as they went to repeat the process when I got distracted as a pop-up appeared from the system with a new mission. It's been a while since I've done a mission or gotten a mission. I still need to go and awaken Rodden, I thought to myself as I opened the pop-up. Mission, A King's Work is never done. The event of the rise of Atlantis has caused many problems for humanity, which mean problems for the Titans. As king, it's your job to help resolve their issues. Help your Titans with their issues. Quetzalcoatl. King Bat. Rhedosaurus. Gurosaurus. Well, shit, should have seen that coming, I thought, and looked to the now destroyed Sentinel. Alright guys, I got to go, meaning well, continue training later, I said, getting a nod from Jason and Artnix and a groan from Tommy. Turning off the training room and watching them leave, I teleported into the Atlantic and after looking around just in case, transformed fully into Zilla. And I noticed how much bigger I was by how much water just get displaced by my transformation, but I wasn't too worried. I was quite far from any cities. After thinking for a bit, I decided to head south and hit two birds with one stone, no pun intended, as I made my way to Quetzalcoatl's territory. It didn't take long for ships to start following me and even some Atlantean scouts, but neither was worth even stopping for as I swam. As I did, the ships and scouts started to get closer to me and I decided to give both parties a warning as I released my aura, and taking some inspiration from the Big G himself, I released a growl and flashed my dorsal spins, coloring L the dark blue, ocean dark green. That did the trick, causing the ships to back off and send the Atlantean scouts into panic and flee, causing me to chuckle. After a while, I made my way to land and started walking to Quetzalcoatl's nest, but I barely need to take a few steps as the goddess of wind herself flew down and bowed her head. Quetzal, asterisk, what brings you to my territory, my alpha? Asterisk, she asked, and I could tell she was a little irritated or sad, it was hard to tell. I came to see if you were having any issues and to complete your request in awakening Rodden, I said, causing the rainbow bird's mood to improve considerably. Quetzal, asterisk, thank you for remembering my alpha, and as for any problems, it's the humans, she said, glaring at a nearby city. What have they done? I asked, and she let out a growl. Quetzal, they continue to invade my nest and leave behind their creations, and when I sleep they attach their creations to me and follow me as I fly, she said, and I couldn't help but feel bad. I need to talk to Saraizawa about monitoring the Titans because that's some stalker level shit, I thought, but looking at Quetzalcoatl it seemed something else was bothering her. Asterisk, is there anything else? Asterisk, I asked, and looking up at me she nodded. Quetzal, they took 2 of my eggs and when I draw near they make the sky cry out in pain, making it impossible for me to reclaim them, she said with sadness. What the fuck? SHOWMEWHERE, I demanded, and she looked surprised by my reaction but nodded, taking off into the sky, and I follow her after her. I'm going to tear apart whoever came up with the idea it was okay to steal eggs from Titans. In fact, I should go back to Japan just to make sure they don't pull some shit like this, I thought, my blood boiling at the audacity of the action. It didn't take for me to figure out where we were going as a large facility in the middle of the desert, papers on the horizon that looked like a military outpost. As we drew near, an alarm went up and the next second later I wanted to tear out my ears. Quetzalcoatl screeched in pain and flew back, but I was pissed and the noise only pissed me off more and ran forward and roared, my aura flaring as I drowned out whatever sonic weapon they had made with my roar. RRROOOAARRR. Ignoring the pain, I tore apart the facility, and after a few guesses of which building the eggs were in, I found them and saw who had stolen the eggs. In big bold letters was Hammer Industries written on the side of a wall. Putting a pin on that little bit of information for later, I grabbed the eggs, but not before unleashing atomic breath, burning the place to the ground, leaving the facility behind as well as the area of the sonic weapon that was still going off. And I wondered for a moment how many people I just killed. Why does it matter? They invaded a Titan under your protection territory and stole their offspring. They got what they deserve. What the hell was that line of thinking? I thought, and shook my head at the sudden line of thinking. After a bit, Quetzalcoatl landed in front of me. As I softly put her eggs on the ground, she quickly inspected each egg, making sure there was no damage. Quetzal, thank you, my alpha, thank you, she said, bowing deeply, and I simply nodded. Take your eggs back to your nest. I will wait by the sea and we shall travel to where Rodden slumbears, I said, and Quetzalcoatl nodded, taking the edges into her mouth before taking off into the sky. As she left, I started walking, but not before creating a clone that was going to contact Monarch and start an investigation as soon as possible. Once I made it to the beach, I lay in the shallow water and waited for the Quetzalcoatl. As I did, I noticed the warships keeping their distance and news helicopters circling above. After about an hour, Quetzalcoatl flew above, letting out a cry, and I followed after her, and right behind us the Navy ships. POV third person. Location, Stark Industry. Tony Stark sat in his office looking like he was about to die of boredom. Pepper Potts rolled her eyes at her boss/boyfriend's antics as she prepared to look over the paperwork he had barely looked at. Just as she was finished, the office went into lockdown as metal shutters dropped down over the windows and the door, turning the room completely dark. Tony, Jarvis, give me something, he yelled as 2 Iron Man suits stepped out of the wall and scanned the area, and Pepper quickly get behind Tony. Pepper, what's going on? She asked, only for the lights of the armed to illuminate the figure of Batman. Batman, Stark, we need to talk, he said, not even acknowledging the 2 suits of armor having their weapons raised at him. Tony, well, if that's the case, you can talk to my secretary and she'll put you down for Friday, he said, only to receive a pinch from Pepper. Batman, sorry, but this is an emergency, he said, throwing a device on the ground, and it projected the news of Zilla attacking a previously unknown Hammer facility. Tony, okay, so why are you bringing this to me and not Hammer? He asked, and the protection zoomed in on the walls and ceilings of the facility, showing the large devices that Tony recognized. Pepper, are those what I think they are? She asked, and flinched a little when Batman turned to look at her. Batman, modified sonic cannon Stark Tech sold to the military by Stan used and failed to take down the Hulk. he said, images projected as he spoke, and Tony said nothing, his face portraying no emotions but his fist clenched hard on his desk. Tony, I'll get right on it, he said, interpreting the Dark Knight's meaning by bringing this information to him. Just because Stark Industries stopped making weapons doesn't mean Descent means old Stark tech disappeared off the market. Infant, he probably just made his tech far more profitable on the black market. Batman simply nodded them all. The security system suddenly shut down, causing both Pepper and Tony to look away for just a moment before looking back. The Dark Knight was gone. POV third person. Location, Isla de Mara. In the skies above the small island, the shadow of Quetzalcoatl covered the medium-sized coastal city, the only city on the island, and even then it was mostly a harbor than a city. And from the ocean came Zilla as it made its way up to the island and started walking inland. Behind it was now a large force of Navy warships and even one carrier. The word quickly spread and many start evacuating the island, taking any boats off the island, but then everything stopped as if a force had caught anyone and everyone's attention and forced them to look towards the two titans, and then it was heard. RRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRR Savannah. But no one had time to process what they had heard when a loud thump was heard and then another, and from the top of the volcano a clawed talon could be seen from the top, and pulling itself from the volcano was the fire demon itself. Rotten. Chapter 103. A monster bears its fangs. POV Zilla. Location, Isla de Mara. I watched as the two lovebirds got reacquainted with each other, letting out shouts and cries of joy. I smiled as I watched and looked at my missions. Mission, Fiery Reunion. Awaken Rodden the Fire Demon for Quetzalcoatl. Reward, Rodden Submission. Emerald DcMcu. Molten Blade. I smiled looking at the rewards. I went to leave but then remembered something and turned to the two birds. Quetzalcoatl, have you heard anything from the worm south of your territory? I asked Quetzalcoatl, who let out a snort of annoyance. Quetzal, the worm does nothing but eat and move the dirt and challenge our borders, she said, and Rodden growled. Rodden, then let us hunt this worm down and I will burn him out of his hole, he growled out, and I simply rolled my eyes. Just don't kill the worm, he heals the earth as you both clean the sky, everything else is fine, I said, and both nodded and bowed as I left, and I noted the large fleet of ships circling the island before heading north towards Ireland. Deciding to play a little bit, I kept close to the surface, slowing my spines to show as I swam. As I moved more and more, followed helicopters, ships, and a few jets and planes flew overhead. Wonder what the news is saying about me right now, I thought, imagining all the agencies trying to get things under control while the news was trying to start drama. I chuckled at the image of the migraine Fury and Ross were probably having right now, causing massive amounts of bubbles to float into my face. Just as I was enjoying said image, I felt the familiar pressure of someone trying to connect to my mind. Ruined my mood as I just brushed it off, only to feel it again, this time much harder. Not as bad as the time Martian Manhunter kept trying, but still annoying and easy for me to brush off. I was expecting a third attempt, but to my surprise and relief, nothing happened, only for my instincts to flare as suddenly something exploded right under me, sending up spurts of water into the air. I dived into the water and saw a large force of Atlanteans under me and in front of me, and guess who I saw leading them? Sitting on a throne being pulled by large sea orzes. Not even hesitating, I charged at the is-called king, only to be intercepted by two gigantic orca monsters, the two charging right back at me. Monster Orca Rax. Title: Atlantean Guardian. LV 75. Stats: STR 700. Dex 650. Int 45. Energy none. Skills none. RRROOAARRR. I roared, my area flaring, sending most of the ambushing Atlantean soldiers swimming away, but the two orcas didn't even flinch. Orru asterisk. The two came at me together, mouths wide open, but I reached them first and bit down hard on one of them, the other trying to go for my neck, only to have its flesh clawed away as I swiped at it. The one in my mouth struggled to free itself, but I just put down harder and with a pole ripped a chunk of flesh just in front of its dorsal fin. It cried out in pain and I went to finish it off, only to be tackled and feel the pain of my scales being bitten down on as a third orca. Asterisk fuck off Shamu. Asterisk I roared and blasted the orca off me with my atomic breath, sending it away with a bad burn mark on its side. Then I turned back to the other two orcas, only to see the Atlanteans sending multiple underwater craft towards me that launched torpedoes at me. But I don't even attempt to dodge, I rushed forwards at them, letting the torpedoes hit my scales, and as one got close enough I bit down, causing it to explode. Then opening my maw I fired my atomic ray for the first time, and unlike my atomic flames, which was like a pillar of green death, the ray was condensed like a pole. The green ray shot out and cut through the remaining Atlanteans, the vehicles, like a lightsaber through a thin sheet of metal. The lucky soldiers caught in the concentrated beam simply evaporated, the unlucky ones were grazed, having limbs disinterested. Shit, this is tiring to us, I thought as I felt my energy reserve quickly draining, and I closed my mouth and couldn't help but look at the devastation. Urru. Coming back to reality, I turned my head to see all three orcas swimming straight towards me, and not even moving. I charged my atomic flames, my dorsal fins flashing with energy. Then in a flash, the ocean became green as I unleashed atomic flames at full power, incinerating two of the three, the last one having gotten lucky by a few feet. But with the heat, radiation, and the fact the ocean around my blast was literally boiling, the last orca cried out in pain and dove, only to stop as I felt the psychic pressure on my mind again and just glared at Namor still on his throne. He hadn't even moved as he watched his soldiers and creatures get killed. The orca seemed to try and resist whatever psychic command Major was giving it, so I gave it a little push with my aura and it quickly swam away. Namor for his part looks mildly interested in the development and waved his hand, causing the water no the ocean to suddenly shift, and all of the soldiers and equipment by his side, thrown and sea oars included, disappeared. And doing a quick check with the system, including my senses, showed the same thing. Namor had just teleported them all away, well, those that were alive anyway, as the bodies of the dead floated around me. What the hell was that about? I thought, truly confused by the sudden and quickly ended encounter. Possibly some kind of test to see your ability himself. Next time someone tries this shit, remind me just to kill them, I thought as I continued to swim away. Aren't you a little worried about the military watching all of that? Why should I be nothing? They can touch me, and whatever they and Namor got from this is nothing to what I can actually do, I thought as I noticed the few ships that decided to stay in the area and not follow. POV third person. It didn't take long for word of Zilla's activities in Mexico to spread like wildfire, destroying an unknown facility that held eggs and awakening an unknown titan from inside of a volcano. Monarch was soon told by Night Fury and would try and deal with the situation and investigate Hammer Industries' involvement as well as possible internal espionage. The footage of Zilla fighting Atlanteans was soon in the hands of S.HEI.L.D. and the US military, as well as the bodies and whatever equipment they had on them. The news soon went worldwide. Zilla was on the move and the US Navy with Monarch was observing the situation, and his current heading was most likely Ireland. POV Namor, King of Atlantis. Location, Atlantis. I sat on my throne thinking over what I had seen of Zilla, what the surface world called Titans, a creature of the sea that not only refused to heed commands but could also cause other creatures of the sea to not listen to me either. Make sure its movements are followed and keep me updated on its movements and all its actions. I want to know everything the surface dealers know about these Titans and more. I commanded my council and they all bowed and set to do as I commanded. My king, what about the negotiations with the surface world? They are soon to come to an end, one general asked, and I simply nodded my head. Yes, and we get what I have wanted since I came to the throne. My kingdom's recognition is not just among the petty kingdom of the ocean but of the surface world, I said, leaning back in my chair. Marina, and you are one step closer to uniting the Earth's oceans under your rule, my husband, she said, sitting on the armrest of my throne. I smile. And one step closer to the world underneath my rule, I said, my hand gripping Neptune's trident and feeling it pulse with energy. POV Zilla. I walked onto the gravel and sand-like beach of Ireland. Walking up into the mainland, I didn't have to wait long for Redosaurus. The large green lizard quickly crossed multiple hills and a town to bow his head. Redu, my alpha, your arrival is conveniently timed, he said, his voice of growls and hisses sounding like a young man. Asterisko, and how is that? Asterisk, I asked, now looking around for anything but seeing nothing wrong. Redu, the entrance to the world below near here has been sealed, he said, and I looked at him surprised at the news. Asterisk, how did that happen? Asterisk, I asked, and I can say for the first time I've seen a lizard shrug its shoulders. Redu, I wasn't there when it happened, but it seems something tried to push itself through or collapsed the entrance on purpose, he said, and I nodded my head. All right, I'll clear the way, show me where it is, I said, and he nodded. I followed him and soon we crossed all of Ireland in just a few minutes. Arriving at the Irish Sea, we dove into the water. As we made our way down, I couldn't help but wonder what my Night Fury clone was up to. Earlier. POV Night Fury. I waited and watched as the original left to go release Rodin with Quetzalcoatl before teleporting to Japan, but more specifically where I had left the two Fantastic Four members and Heat. Just as I suddenly appeared, I scared the pants off of Mendel, who was tinkering with his robot Nigel. Only sparing a second to enjoy his reaction, I equipped Ultimate XLR8 and time seemed to slow down drastically, and I speed off to find the newly built surveillance outpost 55. As I rushed by the still or slightly moving figures and construction crews, scientists, and engineers, and quickly found the newly constructed building. Rising inside, I searched the building before finding Reed, Susan, and Nick talking to Serizawa and Chen, who were on a large screen. I prepared myself for the reactions to the sudden instruction, then I watched as time seemed to speed up, and I couldn't help but enjoy the delayed reaction catching up to me as everyone's surprised expressions morphed onto their faces. All, oh my god, / what the fuck, / the hell. I smiled under my mask as time caught up to me, and I heard all of their reactions and received multiple looks of relief once everyone realized it was me. Susan, Night Fury, you're back so soon, why? She asked, but I simply nodded in her direction looking at Serizawa. Serizawa, always good to see you, but I have some bad news, I said, nodding to the man who nodded back. Serizawa, what seems to be the problem? He asked, and I explained what has happened in Mexico and what was going to happen with the original awakening of a new Titan. Serizawa took this new information in stride, already sending orders, information, and looked like he was about to make some calls. Everyone else not so much. Nick was torn from catching the next flight back to the States or staying and helping in Japan. The same was for Reed and Susan, both looking at each other and having a non-vocal conversation on what to do. Chen, on the other hand, wanted to know all I knew about the new Titan, so I told her the general myth of a fire bird or demon trapped in a volcano called Rodin. Just as things were about to calm down, I noticed a shift in the atmosphere around us. Something had changed. I was about to comment on it when I saw it and grabbed Nick and pulled him out of the way. Crash. Building out of the wall was a massive tire of one of the construction trucks outside, and with the hole made in the room, we could hear the sounds of chaos erupting outside. Serizawa, what is hap dash, he began to say, only for the video to cut out as the large tire was pulled out of the hole, and standing in the enlarged opening was a woman that I felt I had seen before. She wore a black and grey suit of armor that covered her entire body but somehow looked to be skin-tight. The only feature I could see were the small amount of her face the helmet revealed. Image. So you're Night Fury? She asked with a sultry tone as she walked into the room looking me over. Before I could even try to say anything I was suddenly flung out of the building, landing outside my back on the ground, the wind knocked out of my lungs. The hell, I didn't even see her move. I thought as I got up and looked at the hole I made where I exited the building. The woman casually walked out, a slight smile on her face. Oh, impressive, most men can't even take one stroke from me, she said, licking her lips as falling from her arms were 2 whips. And who exactly are you? I asked and switched over to Storm Dragon and used observation on her and felt my mouth fall open. Name dash, title, LV, stats, STR, dex, int dash, energy, skills. Everything is, that's bad, I thought as I unleashed a blast of thunderbolt. A blue bolt of lightning struck her square in her chest, but she didn't even move. She tracked the electricity with her eyes, I thought, as the electricity danced on her armor before fizzling out. She looked up at me, a smile still on her face. Sorry, I only give my name to those who have earned it, and you so far are underwhelming, she said, only to suddenly be wrapped up by Mr. Fantastic. Alright, Monsieur AAHH, he began to say, only to start screaming in pain and fling himself off the woman. The woman looked at him in disgust as her armor suddenly had thousands of small needles that shifted back into smooth metal armor. Mortals should know their place before even daring to look, let alone touch a goddess, she said, each word tinged in venom. And so-called gods should think twice before taking their eyes off a dragon, I said, pushing myself toward the woman, my fist covered and crackling with electricity, and with all my strength I punched her. Krakoom. The sound and force of thunder sent anything not nailed down flying away. Even the prone form of Reed was sent flying back, but the woman only got pushed back a few feet. Ah, but that's the thing, I am a god's and I am but one of many, she said, looking back at me, her face and armor undamaged. I think I'm going to need a bigger monster, I thought as the woman charged at me. Chapter 104 Battle at the Outpost. POV Night Fury. Location, Japan. My instincts screamed at me to dodge, but barely having a second to think, I crossed my arms just in time, but it didn't feel that way as pain shot through my arms and chest from the devastating kick the woman landed on me. Pow. The kick sent me skidding back, but before I could even retaliate, another kick was already headed for my face. But by conjuring a sudden gust of wind, I was just able to dodge the kick and, taking advantage of the opening, grabbed the woman's leg and sent torrents of electricity into her. Ayah! She screamed, but not in the kind of way I'm used to hearing when someone is getting electrocuted, well, unless they have some kind of fetish. But I barely paid it any mind as I saw the armor of her leg shift and spikes popped out like in a wave down her leg, and I quickly threw her away before my hand got impaled. The woman rolled with the force of my throw and landed on her feet and taking the stance of a cat ready to pounce on their prey. And she did exactly that, leaping forward and cracking the ground under her. But I saw it coming and pushed myself off to the side out of her leap's path, or so I thought, as from her armor multiple metal strings extended from her armor, changing her leap's path but not slowing get down at all. For the first time, I was backpedaling at high speed, something I was not as to at all. If the ground wasn't cleared and flattened for construction, I would have fallen on my ass. Deciding I needed to change strategy, one stopped backpedaling and the woman swung at me, her armored hand turning into claws that I barely managed to dodge, the claws leaving a deep gash on my Night Fury armor. But ignoring that for now, as she began to bring her other hand for a second swipe, my mouthpiece opened and I yelled straight into her face. STORMDRAGONRROAARR. For a moment nothing happened, then in the next a Category 5 storm suddenly hit her in the face. Boom krakoom thoom. Instantly the woman and the surrounding area for a few seconds were hit with high winds, heavy rain, hail, sleet, thunder, lightning, and more all at the same time, and the woman had taken it all point blank to the face. Thank God I didn't do that. Pointed a little to the left, I thought, as the woman and everything else behind her, which was nothing but wilderness, and a little to the left, hiding behind some equipment, were some civilians. But they were looking more at the damage I had caused rather than hiding, as my attack had carved a smooth path in the mountain, the trees, dirt, and anything else directly in front of me was destroyed, and the woman was nowhere to be seen. Such power! I am now truly interested, but I must ask, is that the best you can do? The woman asked, her voice coming from behind me. I turned to see her dusting off her armor. Okay, time to bring out a big gun, but how big? I thought, going over my options as the woman circled me, a smile on her lips. I thought about using one of the other titans, but the image of dorsal fins with a blue glow on the coast of Tokyo stopped me from doing that. I have 3 free transformation items, I thought, remembering the items. 1 temporary transformation. 1 free monster. 1 free mech. But the idea of using the items for someone I don't even recognize, and I shook my head and equipped Valstrax's armor and selected Elder Valstrax as my new monster and extended my wings and tail from my back. Oh, and what is this? She said, raising her eyebrow at my sudden transformation. I breathed in, and not until later did I realize I was taking in far too much air for human lungs, and I had changed my body instinctively to be more monster than human. As the air entered my lungs, the colors on my armor shifted from burning orange to violet. Then I breathed out, and like an engine roaring to life, violet flames burst forth from my wings. My armor reacted in the same way as draconic energy ran wild. Roar! I launched myself forward and my wings extended like a spear ready to impale and skewer. Cling! In the instant, my wing extended out like a spear trying to impale. She reached in time to block and used the force of the blow to back away. But to her shock, the distance between us hadn't increased but decreased significantly as I continued to try and skewer her with my wings. She blocked or dodged them all, and as we continued this back and forth did I notice something that shook me but turned that shook into anger and excitement. She's following each one of my strikes and she doesn't even look tired, I thought as I watched with eye of a predator and saw her maneuvering her body out of the way of the next strike just as I was making it. Then I got an idea. Just as she guarded against another attack and began maneuvering anticipating the next, I quickly equipped Herobrine's blade and stabbed forward. The netherite blade made contact with her armor, but to my surprise, the blade didn't even pierce the armor but did leave a cut as the blow sent the woman backward from the knockback effect of the sword. "Oh, you're just full of surprises," she said, her gaze now looking at me like a cat who found a new toy. Her whips fell from both her hand and then began to swirl to feather to form a staff. She smiled at me before charging at me. In response I let out a cry activating Monster's Roar and blasted forward meeting her charge. Our weapons make contact. Boom. The force of our charges making contact caused a dent in the ground to form. My sword sparked off her spear. I pushed forward but she wouldn't budge. I see you're not too good with a sword, or maybe it's not the sword you're used to swinging with," she said, and I growled and opened my mouth firing a blast of draconic energy. She tilts her head, the ball of volatile energy sailing past her head, and with a sudden jerk and a twist my blade is sent pricing the ground. Crack. My head is flung back as the spinning staff finds my chin, and with a kick, I'm sent skidding back, and for the first time, I taste my blood in my mouth. "Such a pretty blade, I hope you don't mind me keeping it to remember the occasion," she said, Herobrine's blade now resting in her hand. "Okay, if speed isn't working, how about something more instant?" I thought as I selected Mutant Void Enderman, the wings and tail on my back retracting back into my body, and after a moment thought I equipped power armor with my Trident of the Drowned Sea. "Oh, new toys, and what do these do?" she asked, pointing Herobrine's blade at me with her staff in her other hand. I didn't say anything as I raised my hand and purple flames enveloped it, and by my side, a tier in reality opened and from it, 20 Endermen walked out, each surrounded by a purple aura. Monster Enderman. LV 10. Stats. STR 100. Dex 80. Int 50. Energy 2000. Skills. Teleportation. 100 energy. Traveling to any place you've been to or can see. Can teleport to the end dimensions. Roar of the End. 500 energy. Can cause fear in enemies, and all skills cost ×2 energy for 1 minute. Eye of Ender, look at the void, it will look back. Passive. Able to track down all that look into your eyes. As the final Enderman walked out of the tier, the portal closed and I pointed to the woman. All their eyes landed on her and they opened their maws. They roared together and charged. Some dissipated, others moved forward, and a few circled their target. Seeing the sudden appearance and approach of unknown creatures only made the woman smile more as she anticipated the first one's sudden appearance behind her. She spun her staff behind her, but the Enderman teleported slightly out of the way of the staff and brought down its clawed hand, only for its hand and head to be pierced by Herobrine's blade. I watched as she fought off the 20 Endermen, easily killing 3 of them before one got even a glancing blow on her. Well, they are only level 10, I thought as I enveloped my trident with purple games and threw it at an opening made by another killed Enderman, the trident striking her in the side. The purple flames enveloped her quickly, but that wasn't the only effect, as from the sky came a flash of light. Krakakakuum. A bolt of lightning struck her at the same moment, teleporting next to her. I grabbed Herobrine's blade from her grip and teleported away while summoning the trident back to my hand. Looking back, I saw all the Endermen pile onto her, beating the armored woman with their strength, only to suddenly stop. Some even stopped mid-swing, their bodies twitching ever so slightly. Then, like puppets whose strings have been cut, they all fell to the ground and stood up, still covered in purple flames. The woman walked and moved like they weren't even there, but I did notice the slits in her helmet were now closed and had no visible eye or mouth holes. "Such interesting pets. Tell me, do you have any more interesting creatures?" she asked, her voice now sounding like it was projected by a speaker probably installed into her helmet. "Oh, you haven't seen anything yet," I said, wondering how things were going around the outpost as purple flames once again cover my body and a tear in reality appeared again. POV Susan Storm. I stood, my hands raised as I maintained the barrier surrounding me and the portables that have become makeshift medical huts, as we were surrounded by Hazmated soldiers that peppered the barrier with small and large fire weapons. "How is Reed doing?" I asked, holding up the invisible dome that rippled every other second as the hazmat suit-wearing soldiers fired continuously into my barrier. "Nick, still unconscious, and those hazmat troopers are about to surround us," he said, looking through the scope of a gun of a fallen guard. "Monique, is there no way for you to allow us to fire out of your barrier?" she asked, and I shook my head. If I had more energy possibly, but holding up one this big while under heavy fire is straining enough, I said, gritting my teeth as explosions impacted against the barrier. "Mendel, so we're stuck here," he said, his voice full of panic, then getting a kick from Elsie. "Elsie, panic on your own time, help me stabilize the injured," she said as she and other scientists helps the injured into the portable or just operated on the ground. "Nick, Randy, any luck calling for help?" he shouted, but the young man shook his head. "Randy, even with NIGIL boosting the signal, I can't get connected to anything. These crazy beekeepers must be jamming the signal," he said in frustration, but I felt a pit open in my stomach. "Or my barrier is blocking the signal," I thought, but shook my head, redoubling my effort to maintain the barrier only to feel my grip on it slip as more explosions impacted it. "Anyone sees Night Fury?" I said as I felt the situation getting more unstable by the second. "Randy, yeah, he's still fighting that dominatrix in armor, but it looks like he's in trouble," he said, and I almost asked what he meant when boom, Outside of the barrier and in the middle of the hazmat soldiers was an explosion as pushing himself up was Night Fury, looking worse for wear. Night Fury Sir-1 hazmat soldier began to say only for Night Fury to envelop his trident in purple flames and stabbed its point into the ground. The flames spread out like a wave across the ground, enveloping everyone and everything. Oh my god. Help. Get it off me. The hazmat soldier screamed and yelled as they were consumed in the purple flames, but Night Fury didn't even turn to look at them as he took the trident and threw it. Following its path, I watched as the weapon covered in flames fly through the air towards a dot in the sky. A moment later there was a lightning strike and the trident returned to his hand, but the next moment the woman who had started all this landed. With a speed that I couldn't believe was even possible, the woman appeared in front of Night Fury, hitting him with a kick that he blocked with his trident but was still sent flying backward, barely stopping himself with his trident as he stabbed it into the ground. Then appearing out of nowhere creature I recognized what Night Fury called Enderman appeared around the women, their claws, hands ready to strike, only for the woman to extend her hand. Like a snake, a metal whip flung out and cut through them all, decapitating them. Before recalling back into her armor, she charged again at Night Fury, who also charged. But the woman, like a professional acrobat, leaned out of the way of the trident and punched Night Fury in his chest, but before she could do anything else he teleported behind her and struck her in the back with the trident, sending her crashing into and through a portable, and a moment later teleporting after her. Noticing the sudden quiet and lack of enemy, I dropped the dome and fell to a knee, sweat dripping from my head. Randy, Night Fury did know that the barrier was there when he did that fire attack, right? He asked, but no one answers him. Chapter 105 The Grim Situation. POV Night Fury. Shit, I'm running out of energy, I thought as I summoned the last group of Endermen. The purple flames that covered the woman dimmed verso slightly. The Endermen charged forward to join what remained of the ones that had been summoned last, but that only made 7 left fighting. I need to change monsters and equip new weapons that can pierce that armor, I thought, and I knew exactly which one to pick. I switched from Mutant Void Enderman to Grim King and changed my armor Berserker armor and equipped Chainsword and Bolter as my new weapons. Oh, it seems you are in a bit of trouble. Wait, you're one of Max's clones, the Grim Summer Rose lookalike said, and I nodded as I tested the weight of the chainsword and bolt gun in my hands. If you are going to try and convince me to start creating a Grim Horde, then save your breath, I said, letting the cures of the armor cause my rage, fury, and anger rise. Every time I blinked I saw a flash of red. The last Enderman died with a staff piercing its chest. The woman didn't even look winded, more like she did a light warm up. The fact she had been playing with me the whole time and could have killed me whenever she liked made my negative emotion rise to new heights. But as I felt the burning rage utterly fill my mind and body, I barely let it show on the outside. I was a little surprised. So what next? I see you have some new toys, but is that all? The woman said, smirking, but I said nothing as I used my gathering negative emotion and used all of it to empower Dark Aura all at once. Skill: Dark Aura. Passive: your presence causes those around you to feel extreme fear and empowers Grim, giving ×2 to all stats. The effect was instant as suddenly all at once the color of the area seemed to vanish, becoming black and white with a shade of gray, and particles of dust floated around me. The woman, to my surprise, barely reacted, and since I was a Grim I could sense her emotions. And I felt how she wasn't afraid, she was excited. Pulling on the activation trigger, my chainsword roared to life and I charged forward and brought the spinning teeth of the blade down. SHSHSHSHSHSH. The colorless and gray area suddenly became filled with light as sparks erupted from the contact between the spinning teeth and the staff. The woman smirked. The smirk on the woman's face disappeared a moment later as I held the bolter to her chest and pulled the trigger. Boom 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 boom. Shit, forgot to make it a single shot, I thought as the bolter fired multiple times and the kick of it tried to break my wrist. But the bolt rounds did their job as the woman was pushed back by the sudden multiple explosions that tore through her armor and pushed her back, causing my chainsword to come down on her helmet. Finding purchase, it bit down and tried to chew through the armor, but the woman quickly jumped back, and the first time since this fight began I saw her look hurt. I sensed the pain she felt. I could see it spreading from the spot where the bolt shells had torn apart her armor, but I also saw the excitement she felt envelop and suppress the pain. No, not suppressing it, she's changing it to become more excited. She's like some weird masochist, I thought as I charged at her again, this time sweeping the chainsword out. She moved her staff to block it, and for a moment it looked like my chainsword would be stuck on the metal staff, only for it to cut through and deliver a swiping cut across her armor and the spot the bolter had opened. Blood dripped from the teeth of my chainsword and I felt a sense of accomplishment. She got too overconfident, so don't be too proud of yourself, clone. Besides, even with that minor wound she could still kill you before you even blinked, Summer said, and I simply nodded in acknowledgement of her words. The woman shakily but quickly stood her hand on her wound, dropping to the side, showing that it had quickly healed, and to my surprise, I watched as the armor also began to mend itself together, but far slower. Such fancy toys, I'll have to let loose a little now. You might learn my name yet, she said, the staff transforming and becoming a short sword. We took our stances waiting for the other to make the first move when she suddenly stopped and listened to something, but even with my hearing I couldn't tell what she was listening to. Sorry, but it looks like we'll have to play another time. Please do get stronger, she said, and before I could even say a word, a loud boom and a flash of light later she was gone. I stood there looking at where she once stood and didn't know how to feel about what had happened, though as a Grim I barely had any emotions, so I left it for the original to think about. Shouldn't you check up on those civilians, clone? It looks like they could use some help, she said in a bored tone, sitting on a rock and pointing back at the base. I grunted in response. Large black wings spread wide from my back, but before I took off I noticed the piece of the woman's staff that I had broken left behind and picked it up before taking off. As I arrived I noticed the various emotions of the survivors, but from my mental count and a glance around, there were very few left of the original staff. Landing I was quickly embraced by Susan Storm, and looking around I felt the various negative emotions turn to positive. Glad to see you're all okay, I said, trying to put emotion behind the words but only managing to sound tired and not monotone. Randy, oh okay, we're lucky to be alive, he said, looking tired, and I saw that he was about to crash from the stress of the situation. Nick, it was thanks to Susan that any of us survived, he said, and he was quick to explain what had happened after me and the woman had left to have our private fight. The base was assaulted by guys in hazmat suits and killing anyone they saw. Susan and the members of Heat getting everyone together to hide behind Susan's warrior. Wait, what happened to Reed? I asked, and I was led to a portable and inside what at first I thought was a bunch of melted rubber, then using observation saw that it was Reed Richards. Susan, apparently that armored woman armor had some nasty tricks. When Reed tried to wrap her up he was stopped by spikes that were tipped with some kind of substance. He's been knocked out since, she said, and I put a hand on her shoulder, seeing her emotion become more negative. Getting an anti-poison from the system was easy, and I handed it to Elsie as well as a regeneration potion. This should wake him up and the second one should heal him quickly, I said. She looked at me like she wanted to question what was in the glass bottles, but from the look the others gave her she didn't question it. Monique, did you learn anything from that woman during your fight? I shook my head and explained in detail how the fight went, and I watched their emotions turn negative. Randy, you were only able to get one good hit on her, he said, and I nodded, not liking the fact he had latched on to that bit of info. Nick, and we have no idea what this was all about or if it will happen again, he said, but as the negative emotion began to take over, the door to the portable opened and standing was Mr. Fantastic. Reed, so anyone going to bring me up to speed? He asked, holding his head. Bringing him up to speed didn't take long, and eventually after getting back in contact with Monarch, the destroyed outpost was swarmed by Japanese Defense Forces, S.HEI.L.D agents, and reinforcements from Monarch. To say everyone wanted to keep what had happened from getting out to the general public would be an understatement. After some hours Susan, Reed, Heat, and I were sitting in a portable having just explained what had happened to the directors of both agencies, a representative of Japan, and a few others. I had just finished telling my side of the story, explaining what I had observed of the woman, and showed off the piece of her staff I had broken off. Ross, so an entire outpost was destroyed again, and all you have to show for it is scrap metal, the general yelled out, his face red. Fury, Ross please, he said in a cold tone, then looked back to me. Is there anything else you can tell us? Anything at all? He asked, but I shook my head. She's a battle maniac and a masochist, otherwise nothing, except I would put the word out not to engage her, I said, getting a few looks from some but a nod from Fury. Ross, why, so you two can destroy another few $1 million in equipment without being interrupted? He said sarcastically. I gave the man a cold glare. So you don't throw your people's lives away fighting a battle you can't win? I only survived because she was too overconfident. If she had taken me seriously we would all be dead, I said, my tone dead serious, but the general snorted. Ross, we don't even know what you're capable of, and you want us to trust your insight to a mystery woman that we have no proof of except for your account and a piece of scrap, he said. Susan, it's not just him, we all saw her. She put Reed into a coma, she declared, but Ross waves her off. Ross, for all we know, all of you could have been hypnotized or something, and it could have been Night Fury who destroyed the outpost. We have no idea his capability, he said, and I felt the emotions and the glances I was getting, and felt a hurt at that. Saraizawa, Night Fury is a founder of Monarch alongside Reed Richards and has been nothing but helpful in our research with the Titans. Why would he destroy an outpost? He said, his voice strained, his eyes locked forward, holding back uglier words for the general. Ross, why wouldn't he? Who could stop him? For all we know he began to rant, only for Nick to loudly cough. Nick, shouldn't we be focused on the situation at hand, not throwing around wild and unprovable accusations? He said, trying to move along. J-Rep, yes, an outpost has been destroyed again by an unknown force again, and we have no information about them again, he said, his voice dripping with contempt that caused Susan to bank on the table. Susan, people are dead and hurt, and all you're doing is trying to find someone to blame and repeating what we don't know and can't do. So I'm going to ask this nicely and get an answer. What can we do right now? She said, her voice cold and leaving no room for negotiation. Fury, so far not much. Read, see what you can find about this piece of metal. S.HEI.L.D will continue to investigate these incidents and find out who is responsible for these attacks, he said, and Ross crossed his arms. J-Rep, our military will help rebuild the outpost and double the security and help subsidize Monarch's researchers and engineers with our own, he declared, and Saraizawa reluctantly nodded. Saraizawa, and we're doing our internal investigation at the moment with the business in Mexico, so the help would be grateful, he said. After a few more minutes of talking everyone began to leave, but I stayed behind, and then it was just me and Fury in the room. Fury, so A.M has shown up again and now they have something new, he said, and I nodded. Any idea what they're after? He asked, and I shook my head. If you wanted to know that, you should have asked Susan and Reed. I didn't even notice A.M until I landed amongst them, I said, leaning back in my chair. Fury shrugged. Fury, if that's everything, I would like to apologize for Ross. He's become far more agitated since Namor and Atlantis, he said, and I waved him off, but I did have some questions. Speaking about Atlantis, what's the verdict? Are we going to war with the ocean people? I asked, and Fury shook his head. Fury, Atlantis will be recognized as a nation and even given a seat at the United Nations. Territorial borders are still being ironed out, he said, and I nodded, noticing the pop-up from the system but ignoring it for later. That's good, but if there won't be a war, why was the general coming at me so hard and seriously? I asked, and Fury seemed to get uncomfortable. I raised an eyebrow at his reaction. Fury, he and a few other US representatives as well as representatives from other countries are going to France to determine solutions to certain issues, he said in a way that felt this was all I was going to get, and I felt my stomach drop. I see. Well, that sounds boring, I said, standing up and waving to Fury as I teleported back to Nighthawk Island with one thought in mind: I need to find the original now. Chapter 106, Thrown Fit for a Monster. POVzilla. Location, Irish Sea. Swimming down to the Hollow Earth entrance doesn't take long, and I wasn't surprised that it looked exactly like how I imagined, a large hole that had been caved in. I could just dig it out or use my atomic breath to reopen the path, but I haven't used my claws in a while, so I got digging. As I did, Redosaurus cleared up the stone I threw behind me, clearing the path. Now that I think about it, when was the last time I visited Hollow Earth? I thought to myself as I dug deeper into the earth following the path of rubble. The last time you enter Hollow Earth was when you visited Lemuria again after rescuing the Fantastic Four. Oh yeah man, that feels like that was years ago, but it's only been a couple of months, I thought, thinking back. /n. After a few more hours of digging, I eventually found the other side and was a little surprised to find more water, but upon entering I immediately knew it was a different body of water. The pop-ups that appeared confirmed it, and another part of the mission was completed. You have discovered the Titan Ocean. Reward: 1 random item. Mission: a king's work is never done. The event of the rise of Atlantis has caused many problems for humanity, which mean problems for the Titans. As king, it's your job to help resolve their issues. Help your Titans with their issues. King Bat. Gurosaurus. Closing the pop-ups with a thought, I looked around this new body of water with some interest, only to then notice Redosaurus swimming to the surface, and I swam after him. As we swam, I noticed how deep this ocean was. It took moments to reach the bottom of the Irish Sea. It had already been minutes and I couldn't see the surface. After a few more minutes I saw the surface and the massive and powerful waves. Redosaurus turned and adjusted his swimming angle. Following him, I noticed that land was ahead of us. Swimming towards it, eventually, we breached the surface to find that the whole area was covered in a massive storm, but far stronger than any I had experienced on the surface. I guess the weather in Hollow Earth is just as big and dangerous as its inhabitants, I thought as I followed the lizard and saw that we were heading to a black sand beach and a jungle. But to call it a jungle would be doing an injustice to the wild and untouched jungle in front of us. The trees alone were big enough to cover both of us without my back spins touching the treetops. So what are you going to do now? I asked, and the giant gecko turned to face me with a smile on his face. Redo, go hunt something. Haven't eaten anything that fills me in a while, he said, then bowed to me before taking off deeper into the large jungle. As I watched him leave, a part of me wanted to follow and see what life for Titans in Hollow Earth was like. I instinctively took a step forward to follow it go my own way, but I pushed the feeling back down. I had 2 other Titans to help, so I made my way back into the water and back to the passage. As I made my way down, I felt a shift in the water. Not wanting any side missions, I flashed my dorsal plates, lighting the dark water green, and growled, causing the water to vibrate. Nothing came out, but whatever was moving around quickly swam away, and I continued down and through the entrance to Hollow Earth and made my way to France. Shouldn't you be a little worried that the world is going to find this and discover Hollow Earth? Not really, since only Titans can travel through them, at least until people figure out and invent the technology needed to travel through them, I said, remembering the vehicles from Godzilla vs Kong. Besides, with what's coming, I think everyone's attention is going to be on other things for a while, I thought as I made it to the shoreline and started walking. As I did, I noticed the large military forces on the coast. But I didn't stop to observe all their reactions to my arrival, even though it would probably be funny to see. As I made my way, I noticed the circling helicopter and other flying vehicles as well as the ground. Once most were civilians stopping to look at me. But what did get my attention was the 3 flying figures helping move people out of my way and the red blur that put up barriers. Superman LV.38. Wonder Woman LV? Martian Manhunter LV? Flash LV.35. So some of the Justice League is already in Europe, I thought as I continued walking, but I came to a stop as I heard the sound of large wings getting closer. A shadow passed over me, and looking up I saw the large bat flying above me. I stopped and waited for him to land. As I waited, I noticed the hovering forms of the Justice League. I didn't see where the Flash was, but I didn't much care either as King Bat landed. K.Bat, Alpha, why have you come to my territory? He asked, and I explained that I was checking on everyone. He nodded. There is one problem that has been bothering me of late, he said, adjusting his wings. What is it? From what I can see, you have been doing well, I said, not knowing what the difference was since last I saw him, but if I had to describe him, he looked stronger. K.Bat, me and Gurosaurus have been taking care of the pests trying to come up from underground for a few weeks now, he said, chuckling, which came out like a low rumble. What pests? I asked if things from Hollow Earth were trying to come to the surface, which was a huge problem. K.Bat, nothing to concern yourself with, just pests seeking to find safer territory for themselves on the surface, he said dismissively, and I nodded. Okay, so what was the problem that's been bothering you? Not even the humans? I asked. K.Bat, no, the humans are always annoying, but nothing I can't handle, and Gurosaurus is happy to spend most of his time eating those pests and patrolling his territory, he said, and I got an update on the mission. Mission, a king's work is never done. The event of the rise of Atlantis has caused many problems for humanity, which mean problems for the Titans. As king, it's your job to help resolve their issues. Help your Titans with their issues. Finished. Reward. King's crown. Or conquer scepter. Or monster's throne. That feels a little anticlimactic, but I'm not going to complain about new loot, I thought, and I nodded to King Bat, then as quickly as possible left with the large bat looking at me strangely as I hurried away, looking at the multiple options. I tried to use observation to get more details on the items, but only a popped up. After a bit of thinking, I thought I would look good sitting on a throne and selected the item, and inspected it in my inventory as I made my way back to the ocean. Item. Monster's throne, a throne meant for a true monster and one who will rule as one. What do you think, Tron? I asked, looking over the description of the throne, not sure how to feel about it. It would appear to be an item meant to give some type of buff or power up to whoever sits on it. Well then, let's hurry, I want to see what it can do, I thought as I dove into the ocean and quickly headed towards the bottom. It didn't take long for me to lose any followers and find a place to transform and teleport back to the island as soon as I appeared. However, I didn't expect my clone to dive into me without warning. The flood of memories I had made my legs buckle as the throbbing pain of memories tried to find their place in my head. I wanted to scream in pain, and it took a lot of willpower not to, as I felt the emotions pass over me and through me, and new information and knowledge caused me to feel new emotions on the spot, still trying to understand the old ones. Arriving back at Japan and the outpost informing monarch of the situation, then A.I.M and a strong woman appeared and attacked. I had survived the battle, but it felt and probably was my first loss, the first one since arriving in this world, then the information that would lead to Magneto attacking Paris. It felt like it took hours for the pain to stop, but it only took 5 minutes. As soon I felt my legs were no longer noodles and my head was done feeling like it was being banged on like a drum. I stood and checked up on the kids. Looking in the living room, I saw that they all were asleep, or more like passed out, where they lay with my clone that looked after them, cleaning up whatever mess they created. Not having a reason to recombine with him, I let him continue doing what he was doing as I went to the training room. Entering it, I got out all 3 of my new items, the Emerald McEweet and Molten Blade, both weapons appearing in my hands. The monster's throne appeared on the ground in front of me. I set them down and used observation on each of them. Items. Emerald McEweet, a weapon blessed by the Serpent God. Gives ×2 damage to all air or wind attacks wielded. Molten Blade. A weapon made from the molten blood of Rodan, the fire demon. All fire attacks deal ×3 damage when wielded. Oh, these 2 will be useful, especially the Molten Blade. I have a lot of monsters that use fire in some way, I said to myself. Putting the weapons back in my inventory, I activated the random item. Item. 1 times Notch Apple. Now that's useful, it'll save you for a rainy day, I said, holding the glowing and gold apple in my hand, looking it over before putting it away and walking up to the throne. It looks like a regular fancy chair, I thought, looking it over, but the so-called throne didn't look anything special. Image. What do you think? I asked, looking over the dance chair. I think you need to sit in it. I mean, do you think it's a good idea to? I said, tracing my hands over it. Unknown to little Data, but I've been with you long enough to know that you're going to sit in it anyway. Thank you, Tron, for making it sound like I have the attention span of a goldfish, I said, deadpanning. You are very welcome, slightly smiling face. I smiled and shook my head, and after a moment turned and sat down on the chair and waited. Is something so? I began, only to feel every muscle in my body suddenly clench. My vision went red and I felt bile come up from my stomach, and I watched as pop-ups appeared from the system. System update: forced evolution detected. Error. Host is not eligible to evolve, cancelling evolution. For a moment the sudden pain subsided and my muscles relaxed. I went to get up only for the pain to return, but this time I felt my blood boil and I coughed up a small amount. Evolution cancelling DENIED. Error. Host is not eligible to evolve, cancelling evolution. Again the pain subsided. I wanted to call out to Tron, but before I could even think of his name the pain returned. Evolution cancelling DENIED. Error. Host is not eligible to evolve, cancelling evolution. Again. Evolution cancelling DENIED. Error. Host is not eligible to evolve, cancelling evolution. And again. Evolution cancelling DENIED. Error. Host is not eligible to evolve, cancelling evolution. I felt my body tear itself apart and put itself back together. The entire time the pain was so much that I roared and cried in the voices of my monsters as I transformed and changed parts of my body as I tried to escape the throne and this pain. I felt the things inside me change and shift, and when I looked at myself I saw a mismatch of my monster's body parts attached to me. That's all I would remember before passing out. POV third person. As Max's body slumped on the throne, parts of his body still transforming randomly, the chair he sat on began to transform as well. The throne itself expanded, the entire chair becoming double its size and becoming what it was supposed to be, a throne for a monster, colored black like burnt steel with a crown at the top. Image. After a while, the throne finished its transformation, but Max/Night Fury hadn't. The throne was meant for a monster, but Max had always kept his monstrous instincts in check, always put it in the back of his mind to be used like a weapon, letting his humanity guide him. Consequently, he has very little territory of his own. The Titans under him have more land than him, their alpha, their king. How he played the role of hero, and sure he was good at the role, but it's been far too long since he has played it himself. I think it's about time for something new to change things up. So now I want to see what happens when you let the monsters out, Max. I want to see how it shacks things up. Oh, don't worry, your personality will be the same, it's just that the human part of you that you use as a shield or maybe an anchor would be more accurate and will be weaker, maybe even gone completely. Oh, I can't wait for you to wake up, do keep me entertained, maybe you deserve a bit of an extra reward, this was a painful process for you. But is that enough for me? Perhaps it's time for someone to notice Nighthawk Island is active, yes, that should be wonderfully entertaining. I do hope he enjoys himself. Oh, what am I saying, I know he will, who doesn't like to let their monster out. Chapter 107, a new type of monster. POV Wally West aka Kid Flash. Location, Mount Justice. I ran through the halls of Mount Justice, the old base for the JSA, having found many tidbits of past glory for the retired team. A few old customs of different members, a photo album that I put in my room for safekeeping and would make a good gift to the retired speedster, and a few old pieces of equipment that I put in my room for souvenirs. Speedy, Robin, and I were here to survey the base to see if it could be used as a base for the rest of the team. We wanted to have our base of operations like the Justice League and Avengers have. So Coulson had decided to pull up a list of possible bases of operations, most of them being abandoned or severely out of date. Like the Hall of Justice in Washington D.C., it is a fake but still functions base of operations for the Justice League, but the constant tourists were not a good selling point. Or a mansion in the middle of Central Park owned by Tony Stark from his mother, he was willing to allow it, but after going inside the rundown and abandoned house we decided against it. Now we were Happy Harbor, looking around the old mountain base that hadn't been used since the 80s if I'm remembering correctly. As I continued to run through the old parts of the base, I stopped and listened as I heard a repetitive beeping. Following the sound, I found a room hidden behind a bookshelf. Looking inside, it looked like some kind of secret meeting room with the JSA logo on a large round table surrounded by chairs covered in dust. Looking past the table, I ran up to what looked like a large computer from a history book with a dim red flashing light and a small screen. Wiping the screen with my hand, I saw, "Alert, Nighthawk Island disturbance, alert." What the heck is Nighthawk Island? I said to myself, but then shrugged. I bet Robin will know, I said, and ran off to get the others. After a few minutes of convincing the others that it wasn't a prank and that what I front was real, we all now stood in front of the small screen looking at the alert. Speedy, what the heck is Nighthawk Island? The partner of Green Arrow asked as he squinted down at the screen. I shrugged. No idea, but we happen to have a bird with access to a supercomputer, I said. Robin nodded his head and his arm guard projected a holographic screen. Robin, Nighthawk Island is an old military base used by a special group of PLAs during the World Wars. They were called the Black Hawks, but they were disbanded and the base abandoned in the 70s, he said, protecting multiple old pictures and newspapers on the group of soldiers and their planes. Oh, that place must have tons of cool souvenirs to add to my collection, I said, getting multiple looks from the two other sidekicks. Speedy, don't you already have enough junk in your house? He asked, a smug smile on his face, but I shrugged. Robin, shouldn't we be more worried about the alarm from the abandoned military base? He asked, still going through the data. Why, it's probably some kind of computer glitch, let's just unplug this thing, I said, looking around, and Speedy nodded in agreement. Robin, I'm not so sure about that considering how much old weapons and equipment are still on the island, he said, causing me and Speedy to look at each other. Then we smiled. Speedy, okay, so when do we leave? He asked, and I nodded rapidly. Robin gave us both a look, eyebrows raised with suspicion, then he sighed. Robin, you guys just want to get a private island as our base, he said, but we both just smiled back at him and gave him a thumbs up. Come on Robin, don't be like that, we can bring the other as well, I said, and Robin shook his head as we walked out of the room. POV Max Draco. I felt strange. I tried to open my eyes but they were heavy. I tried to move but every limb gets stiff and unresponsive. Tron, what happened to me? I asked, hoping for a reply, and I felt glad a moment later. It seems your new throne has forced you to evolve far further and sooner than possible. It shall take you a while to get used to your new body and appendages. Oh, Tron, what do you mean by new body and appendages? I asked, my mind far too tired to panic about the statement, so I chose to be indifferent to the news. I feel you should further rest before dash. Tron, tell me please, am I still human? I asked, interrupting Tron. A sense of dread filled me as Tron was silent for a long time. Please just dash. TLLME. I roared in my mind, but I felt the echo and wondered if I let out a roar by accident. After a moment my stats appeared in front of me. Name Max Draco. Race Monsterborn. Title Founding Member of MARVE. LV1. Stats. STR 220. Dex 200. Int 100. Energy 500,000. Current points 89,000. Skills. Transformation. The user can transform into a selected monster or mech. Monster's eye. Let's get a good look at you. Passive. User can sense the intentions of those who look into your eyes. User can see the stats and information of others. Monster's outcry. Hear US roar. Dash. Monstrous King's aura. Your presence makes those around you nervous and in awe of you. Weaker enemies will be unable to approach you and cannot attack you. Your subjects under your gaze will bow, but an enemy will be stunned for 25 seconds. Can be boosted with energy to force those around you to go unconscious or die. Monster's body. Wolf in sheep's clothing. Passive. Like any monster, your body is a weapon to your prey and those who get in your way. Can use energy to create and change the look of your body within reason. The user's body will automatically adapt so you may survive a life or death situation. Monstrous physique. Passive. When a monster is selected, you gain all its physique attributes added on to your own. When a monster is selected, all passive abilities stack with your own. Shining Draw of Destiny. I'm feeling the flow. Passive. Almost instantly you can draw any weapon and or tool from its holster or your inventory. When you draw your cards they always give you what you need. Blood of monsters, let the blood flow. Passive. When enough of your blood is spilled or you have taken enough damage you will gain a certain boost depending on the monster selected at the time. Spirit of machines, the flesh is weak, iron will last much longer. Passive. Dash. Monsterborn. Beings who have had their humanity stripped from them by choice or not, all that's left is the memories of being one of them and the growing instincts of the monster you will become. I was silent for a long time, going over everything that popped up in front of me until I gathered whatever strength I had left and opened my eyes and looked at myself. I saw clawed hands gripping the sides of the throne. My entire body was like armor, but I could feel through it, so I knew it was my skin, which was inky black, and loping at the far wall I saw my face, a mask of milky white that looked like a skull with 2 eye holes that were black voids stared back at me. Image. I don't have a mouth anymore, I thought, looking at myself. Tron said nothing as I continued to stare at myself. I heard a noise that I couldn't identify. I tried to ignore it until I realized the noise was me. I was breathing ridiculously, gas in and out. I felt a burning sensation in my chest. Everything was becoming blurry. I tried to keep whatever was building up down, but I couldn't. The self-control wasn't there for me to control my growing emotions. And then the air rippled and the ground shook. Pieces of the metal room ripped off the sides and ground of the training room, but it quickly repaired itself. The tired and stiff feeling in my body was now replaced with uncontrollable emotions. TRONGIVEMESOMETHINGTOTEARAPART, The training room flashed to life and I looked to see I was in a grassy plain, and from atop a hill I looked to see an army with sentinels flying just above it. I bent down, taking a runner's stance, and then pushed myself off the ground. The earth cracked with each step I took as I ran far faster than ever before. The bullets and weapons of the army bounced off my new skin. I ran, becoming a blur of black mass. I didn't even attempt to dodge as I felt no threat from any of the soldiers or robots. The first man to die did so quickly as with everything I had I punched him in the face. His head exploded on impact, but I don't marvel at my actions. Everyone else did, staring at the scene in abject terror. My first became a clawed hand and slipped out, slicing the faces off of multiple soldiers who cried out in pain or had their throats slit or were decapitated. But even then, looking around, I saw the soldier backing up and the sentinels flying just above, maneuvering themselves to try and not kill any of the soldiers. STOPMOVING. I said. I released my new aura and everyone, one of them was caught in it. The healthy green plains and the blue sky suddenly had a red and black tinge. The soldier stopped and dropped their weapons and fell to the ground dead. I knew this because as soon as it happened the sentinels opened fire with a barrage of missiles. Robots ain't affected by an aura, that's interesting, or maybe they have to be sentient, I thought as the barrage of missiles hit or landed around me, only to suddenly stop. I looked around and was about to question what was going on when I heard a metal tapping and a screen appeared in front of me showing the entrance of the training room. To see a sleepy Luna standing outside the door, I paused and looked down at my new form. Uncontrollable panic and sadness began to fill me until I remembered Monster's body and tried to make myself look like myself again, or my past self. Slowly at first, my body began to shift, and only then did I even realize I had also gotten taller than what I once was, as I felt myself lose a few inches, and a few seconds later I was back to my old self. But why does it feel so wrong? I thought before shaking my head and making my way to the door and opening it. I saw Luna trying to keep her eyes open. Luna, Papa, I'm hungry, she started and lifted her arms to indicate that she wanted to be picked up. Oh, and what is it you want to eat, my hatchling? I asked, picking her up and moving toward the living room. Checking the time, I saw I had been stuck to that chair until morning. Luna, pancakes, she said, putting her head on my shoulder, and I chuckled and patterned her head. Max. Yatron. I'm sorry, I should dash. Don't, you didn't and couldn't have known this would have happened, so no reason for you to be sorry. Let's just remember not to touch mysterious artifacts that pop out of the system, okay? I thought, walking into the living room just in time to see everyone else walking up. Okay. But as I began to cook I couldn't help but notice the disappearance of my clone and began to sweat drop, imagining how bad that would have been if my clones were doing something important. POV Scientist Supreme. Location? Do they not have the concept of stealth where you come from, or how about leaving no witnesses because of this? I said, showing projecting a screen is leaving behind witnesses, I said as the projection showed. Monarch outpost attacked by unknown forces was at the top of the news, but the woman shrugged her shoulders. Well, I would say mission accomplished, since no one what we were after or who are except those who you're already fighting with, so I said it's a win, she said, leaning back in the chair. I sighed. In a way, she isn't wrong, I thought, and decided to move on to other things. So what was Night Fury a good challenge? I asked the woman, who then licked her lips and shook her head. He and I were holding back, testing each other, but I'm sure I could have killed him if I wanted to. Must say, if you have more like him, then my lord will be far more interested in this little backwater of a world, she said, and I felt a shiver go up my spine. Chapter 108 Island Visitors. POV Max Draco. I sat in the command room of the Nighthawk Island base, looking at the holographic world map, looking at the territories of the Titans under me and nearby movements of multiple military and monarch. It has been a few hours since my new evolution, and I had discovered a few things. Like how the monster's throne was now soul-bound to me, and whenever I wanted to I could summon it and it would form underneath me when I moved to sit down. To be honest, I thought it was badass to have a dark metal throne form out of thin air whenever I took a seat, and couldn't wait to show it off, plus its ability wasn't bad either. Item. Monster's throne, a throne meant for a true monster and one who will rule as one. All aura ability effects are doubled when sitting on the throne. Then there was the problem of my clones which had disappeared with their memories as I evolved, so I had to summon new ones to take the place of the old, but there was a problem. My clones were now far more instinct-driven than before. Even when they looked like when I was human, even then they looked uncomfortable at the change, performing to look like their natural forms far more. After a while, I decided to put Thunderbird, Nemean Lion and Dryad to stay on the island and guard it and the kids. I also sent Yautjia to New York to make sure my superhero career was still active. Now some might think I'm crazy for sending a predator to protect New York. So I had to point out to my clone that there was no worthy prey, so to hunt anyone in the city went against the Yautjia code of honor. Plus I let the clone use the personal ship I got back when I finished hunting in Westeros. And to play the role as Max Draco himself, I chose the water element since it seemed the most comfortable in human skin, and it was an element so it didn't have any instincts besides absorbing water, so it would just look like I drink a lot of water for a while. After all that, I now sat down and looked at the holographic map of the world and felt a bit dissatisfied. So what to do now? I looked at the map and saw the island I called home and shook my head when a pop-up appeared. Mission: a king needs a kingdom. You are a mighty king but without a kingdom or large swath of land to call your own. Time to change that. Claim the North Atlantic. Claim the South Atlantic. Reward: King's Crown. Or Conquer Scepter. I blanched at the familiar display of the other two items but shook my head as I felt that maybe getting all their items might get me something good, so I accepted the mission. So where do you plan on claiming the North and South Atlantic? That and more, I said, rubbing my chin and looking at the map. What do you mean you're going to conquer after all Atlantis then? No, let Namor have his kingdom under the waves. I will own the water he lives in anyway. No, I'm think about the Savage Lands, I said, the man booming in on a particularly hazardous region of the northern pole. The Savage Land, why there? Many reasons. One is that it's currently free untapped land of resources, plus it's the perfect place to set up a base, I said, leaning back in my chair. But what about the island? Are you going to abandon it? Of course not, but with 4 dragons on the way and 3 growing titans and 2 Digimon and 2 more on the way plus any future kids, I think we're closing in on the maximum amount of monsters this island can hold, I said, picturing the image and chuckling. I see your point, so when are you going? I guess the sooner the better, I said, getting up and teleporting outside. On the beach of the island I heard a growl. I looked back to see my clones with Artnix, Jason, and Tommy. They waved at me and the clones nodded and went back into the forest. I nodded back and selected Zilla. The feeling of power, strength, and superiority spread throughout my body. Not waiting another moment, I dove into the ocean's water and transformed fully, and I roar. POV Wally West aka Kid Flash. Location: over the Atlantic. The whole Champions team was sat in the borrowed Quinjet on our way to the Nyok Island. Spider-Man: so how did you convince Carlson to let us borrow a Quinjet, kid? He asked while Robin flew the jet, and I felt the collar of my chute get a little hot. Cough. Will you know, it was an emergency possible apart from an abandoned military base and all, I said, getting a look from Dick and Roy. Speedy, he said he would send someone to investigate it, but you decide it would be us and took the jet. He asked. I wanted to deny it but I simply shrugged. Dagger, wait, you stole a Quinjet? She asked, crossing her arms. Cloak sitting next to her, and I couldn't help but wonder what their relationship was. Not steal, borrow. We going check to see what glitch is causing the red alert at Mount Justice while we see if this place can be our new base, then we return the Quinjet. No harm done, I said, explaining my plan when suddenly Squirrel Girl jumped out of her seat and covered her ears, her squirrel curling around her neck. White Tiger, who had been napping, woke up clutching her ears. Black Cat just across from her trying to see what was wrong. Squirrel Girl, holy moly, did you guys hear that? She yelled. We all looked outside and I felt the Quinjet come to a stop, hovering in the air. After a moment of nothing I look back at the girls. I don't hear anything, I said, looking to the other, and we all looked around for something to explain the girls' strange, well, stranger than usual behavior. Squirrel Girl, you guys seriously didn't hear that massively roar? It sounded like something woke up ready for a fight, she said, still covering her ears. White Tiger, we have more sensitive hearing than anyone else. Squirrel, that must be why we're the only ones that can hear the roar, she said, taking her hands from her ears. Black Cat, do you think it was a titan? She asked, causing everyone to look outside even more, but Robin shook his head. Robin, if it was, then it probably didn't notice us, so let's keep going, he said, quickly getting us back on course to Nighthawk Island before anyone could even suggest something else. It only took about 20 more minutes before we spotted the island's small piece of land covered in thick forest with very little of the original base poking through the forest. Not seeing anywhere else to land, we set the Quinjet on the beach. As soon as the ramp was down I ran out and inhaled the fresh ocean air. Oh yeah, this is going to be our base, I said, running around the private beach and checking out the view of the ocean. Black Cat, shouldn't we check out the base before we decide on that? She said, stepping off the ramp with the others. Robin, okay, the entrance to the base should be a few minutes inland, we just need to get to the base of the mountain, he said, and pointed at the one out of place mountain on the island. Everyone nodded. Alright, met you guys there, I said, and ran into the forest. Trees and plants blurred by me as I ran through the forest, only for my foot to get caught on a root. I rolled for a few feet and came to a stop when I face planted into a tree, the fall on my back. I am so glad no one saw that, I said to myself, only to freeze when I heard. Pft, ha ha ha, snored, ha ha ha. I turned to see where it was coming from, only to see 4 kids laughing so hard that 2 of them were rolling on the ground. One was clutching her side and another was trying hard to hold in her laughter but was failing. Then I noticed 3 of them were wearing some kind of armor, while the youngest from what I can tell wore a black dress and had. Are those bat wings? Robin, kid, are you okay? Why did you stop all of a sudden? He asked through the communicator in my ear, and I quickly got off the ground. Cough. Well, while I was running I found a bunch of kids, I said, trying to ignore my embarrassment as the kids continued to laugh and point at me. White tiger, I'm sorry, did you just say you found a bunch of kids? She said, and sounded like she didn't believe me. I was about to respond when the kids suddenly started waving and pointed back at me. You should have seen it. Papa, he rolled so fast into that tree, a boy said, still on the ground, said, still, a smile plastered on his face. Yeah, and he went splat like a cartoon, the oldest girl said, but was still giggling. I felt my face go red and I tried to shake it off when my brain caught up to what they were saying and I raised an eyebrow. Wait, Papa, who's Papa? I asked and felt a breath of hot air hit the back of my head. Ggggrrrr. Hearing the low but powerful growl, I slowly turned to see a massive lion standing on a rock looking down at me, golden eyes and mane with teeth bared at me. Nope, I said and ran back at full tilt and only barely managed to stop myself from crashing into Speedy, who had just cut a branch blocking the group's path. Speedy, Jesus kid, you almost ran me over, he said, but then looked at me concerned. Dude, are you alright? He asked and I nodded. Yeah, ran fast from a big lion, kid's dad, I said, trying to catch my breath. Spider-Man, you ran from a lion? He asked, looking confused, but I nodded. Black cat, and those armored kids, dad? She asked and I shook my head and went to correct her but never got the chance as we all jumped and turned to a new voice. No, the lion is their father and protector, one of many, a figure said, but when they stepped out for us to see I was confused about what I was looking at. It looked like a man but with green skin and covered in gold-colored leaves that covered his entire body, even acting like the hair on his head, and in his hands was an ornate-looking longbow, but no quiver or arrows. Robin, who are you and where did you come from? He asked, hands lowered to his belt ready to grab for anything he needed. And the others did the same, taking stances or getting into a position to strike if things got heated, but the man didn't even annul this and continued to stare at us all. Dryad, I am Dryad and I live here and you all are intruding, he said calmly, now leaning on the bough. Spider-Man, we're the champions and sorry about coming in uninvited, but we didn't even know anyone was living here, he said, and Dryad nodded understanding. Dryad, now that you do I ask, please leave this place and be on your way, he said, but then Squirrel Girl walked up. Squirrel Girl, so are you like a dryad from Greek mythology? She asked, and the man nodded his head. Does that mean you know magic and stuff? She asked, and I rolled my eyes and held in a groan. Robin, actually we came here because we got an alert from an old military base and we came to investigate, he said, stopping any talk of so-called magic. Speedy, and maybe move in if that's okay with you, he said, adding that last part hastily, but Dryad didn't seem to notice or didn't care. Dryad, another has already taken the base as their own. Sorry to disappoint you, he said, making my already sour mood turn bitter. Robin, and who would that be? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Dryad, the one called Night Fury, he said, much to everyone's surprise. POV Max Draco aka Zilla. I stood at the bottom of the Atlantic, my dorsal spins glowing, lighting the dark water with a bright green glow, sending all the sensitive sea creatures swimming away and attacking others, but I wasn't paying any attention to them as I waited. Then I saw it and turned to see tentacles crawling along the ground. Then from the darkness just out of reach of my green glow came a gigantic octopus, multiple glowing red, staring at me. Mission, a king needs a kingdom. Updated. You have challenged the master of the North Atlantic. Defeat the Deep Dark Kraken. Monster Deep Dark Kraken. Title Guardian of Atlantis, Master of the North Atlantic. LV 100. Stats. STR 800. Dex 750. Int 99. Energy none. Skills none. The Kraken bellowed, the ocean water vibrating as I felt its aura wash over me, and my eyes glowed green as I roared right back. Chapter 109 Rats. POV Max Draco aka Zilla. It also looked at me, but with a mix of confusion and terror as it saw that I didn't even flinch. It raised its gigantic tentacle ready to attack. It didn't even get halfway to finishing raising its tentacles off the ground as a fires a atomic ray and a focused green beam of energy cut through the octopus up and down, left to right. Scurry. The deep dark Kraken screamed in pain as the green beam of light cut its flesh into neat chunks. It tried to block the beam with its tentacle, but that only caused it more pain as two tentacles were cut cleanly off, dropping to the ocean floor. Suddenly a cloud of black covered the entire area, drowning my green glow in a black cloud. I looked around when suddenly I was struck by a school bus-sized tentacle, then another, and soon I was attacked on all sides. But when the next attack came, I saw it coming and bite down on the tentacle and started to burn the tentacle with my atomic breath. The Kraken screeched in pain once again and wrapped a tentacle around me and pulled me off, ripping, and I took a chunk of flesh with me. The tentacle wrapping around me tightened, and after a few moments of resisting, I activated burning transformation. I felt the energy inside me instantly reacted. I felt the energy intensify. The green glow around me became brighter and I roared and released my Alpha Titan aura. The dark cold ocean water now glowed in my radioactive green and started to become warm. RRROOAARRR. The deep dark Kraken recoiled, releasing me, and tried to flee, to run and escape, but I would not let it as I collected the energy within me and unleashed my atomic flames. A pillar of burning green energy collided with the Kraken. It screeched in pain. It released another cloud of black ink, trying to propel itself into the darkness and cold of the Atlantic it used to, but it never had the chance as the green glow suddenly turned a bright blue and the green atomic flames became the more powerful atomic blue flame. The blue flames pierced the Kraken's hide, burning through its body and continuing through the other side, and a pop-up from the system appeared. I stopped the beam and released my burning transformation. I felt my body become tired and I wanted to lay on the ocean floor and fall asleep, but I shook my head and swam south to my next opponent. As I swam I couldn't help but wonder what my other clones were doing right now. POV Night Fury, Predator. Location, New York. Pathetic. I growled out as I let the thug drop from my grasp. All around the ally were the unconscious and groaning bodies of thugs. I don't even get any points from betting up thugs anymore, I thought as I jumped up and climbed the wall of a building just in time to get on the roof and avoid the police cars and ambulances that just arrived. As I walked to the middle of the roof I pressed a button on my arm devices and after a moment a soft humming as if appearing out of nowhere a door slid open like an elevator and now an entrance appeared on the roof. I walked into the entrance and watched as the door slid back into place. I felt the small space move and after a few moments the door slid open again and I walked onto the strategic room of my ship. As I walked into the middle of the room displayed a 3D mode of the entire city that could show real-time information about the entire city but for now, was monitoring police activities and reports. Pressing a few buttons I felt the ship readjust itself and began lifting back into the air and began circling the city. Is there truly nothing worth hunting in this city? I thought, hoping for one of the animal-themed villains of the city to show up. But then the ship detected a disturbance. Zooming in I saw a bum in an ally trash diving and scoffed, but as I was about to dismiss the image the man turned looking into the darkness of the ally and screamed. He tried to escape the large bin of trash he was in only for a large clawed appendage to extend from the shadows of the ally and came down on top of the trash can closing the plastic top on the screaming man, trading him inside as it was dragged into the shadows of the ally. Well, that happened. I said it didn't take long for me to get the ship to hover over the ally and I was soon in the ally looking at where the trash bin was dragged away. I was transformed into my Yautja form and equipped with my heavy predator armor and I was surprised that the naturally white armor could change its color to fit the environment without my input. Image. I leaned down and saw the massive heat imprints of paw prints on the concrete and the friction heat from the dragged trash can. Not hesitating a moment I followed the track and was surprised at how little the heavy armor affected my movements. It didn't take long for the tracks to lead me to the trash bin, now empty and on its side all of its contents including the man gone. No blood and there's no sign of any type of mucus or bodily fluids. I thought my helmet scanning the trash bin but found nothing of interest. Then I looked around and looking down I saw a manhole cover. But with a closer look at the concert around it was cracked in such a way that I could imagine with enough strength you could pick up the large slab of the concrete and move it to the side revealing a large hole. After a moment the earth rumbled and I could hear the sound of metal moving fast on tracks under me. Whatever this thing is, it's smart, I thought, but then my instincts flared up and I froze as I waited and listened as the sound of claws on brick slowly crept up behind me. Turning I faced a gigantic rat with grey dirty fur that was the size of a truck that clung to the wall. Its eyes glowed gold looking down at me with claws the size of a person's hand and tusks the length of an arm, but my shock, it wasn't alone. From the shadows around me and the tops and spaces between buildings, many more giant rats crawled out hissing and carrying their wicked teeth, saliva dripping from their mouths. Monster Mutant Rat, Scout. LV 15. Stats. STR 50. Dex 77. Int 30. Energy none. Skills. None. I looked around my mask marking all the different rats, the number rising to a remarkably high number of number 35 targets. The twin heavy plasma casters on my shoulders extended out, a soft humming coming from each of them. The wrist blade on my right hand expanded and in my left, my chainsword hummed. So who's first? I asked, and from behind me, a rat jumped off the wall, fanged mouth open, claws outstretched. Click. With a splat, the rat falls to the ground dead, a hole in the back of its head, and I smile as the 35 becomes 34 with a satisfying ting sound. One of my heavy plasma casters glowed ever so softly that I turned looking down at the corpses when a notification appeared. Plus 200 credits, plus 300 EXP. Oh, this just got interesting, I said and activated the chain sword, the teeth becoming a blur. So who's first? I called out. Scree 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 scree. The horde of rats charge forward and my plasma casters immediately start blasting away, blowing large holes in some. Two get close, their mouths open. I stab one with my wrist blade into the top of its mouth, the other gets cut in two as the chain sword paints me and everything nearby in the rat's blood and guts. Another bites down on my arm only for it to cry out in pain as bolts of electricity force it back and left it convulsing on the ground. VVVRRRRMMM. Scree 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 asterisk. With wide and rapid swings I cut open and decapitated any rat who came close, while the few that got past quickly joined their kin, their blood staining my wrist blades. But after a while, the horde of rats suddenly stopped and I glanced around to see that the rest of them were backing away and hissing at me. I took a glance at my targeting system and it showed that there were still a few rats left. 17 targets remaining. I looked towards the remaining rats and took a step forward. They immediately backed away and I felt a flare of savage glee seeing their fear. I ripped my mask off my face, letting it drop to the ground, and took a deep breath and roar. The classic roar of the predator echoed through the alleyways of New York and the rats all around me scattered as fast as they could. As I watched the last rat flee with its tail between its legs, I looked at my status and smiled at my new strength. Monster Yautja. Tidal Blooded, Dragon Slayer. LV 35. Stats. STR 140. Dex 105. Int 89. Energy none. Credit, 103,600. Skills. Thermal vision. Passive. Can see heat signatures. I should get some skills, I said to myself, and only then did I realize the situation I had just stumbled upon. Giant mutated rats were in the city of New York and I had just let a few escape back into the city to cause who knows how much damage. But as this thought washed over me I felt nothing as I looked around for the biggest of the rats to add to my collection of skulls. But then a notification appeared with a new mission interesting my search for a trophy. Mission, New York's rat problem. You knew this city had a rat problem but this is ridiculous time to call an exterminator. Hunt and kill the mutant rats hiding in the city. Find and destroy the rats' nests. Reward. Title, Vermin Slayer. Accept. Y/N. Not even worth my time, I said dismissing the mission and continuing to look for the most worthy of these rats to add to my collection. I felt a small part of me question myself but I simply shrugged it off, but I decided I should at least let someone else know about the problem so taking an earpiece out of my inventory I placed it in my ear. After a few seconds I heard a familiar voice. A few hours later. I watched as the 4 black and unmarked SUVs quickly drove into the alley and like clowns getting out of a tiny car the S.H.E.I.L.D. agents quickly secured the area. But some if not all of them had differing reactions to the bloody mess I had left in the alley. Some looked like they were about to puke, others gawked or stood still for a few seconds before moving on. But I barely paid attention to the grunts as Phil Cowlson quickly walked up to me barely glancing at the giant rats stunned around the area and somehow avoiding the deeper puddles of blood. During the wait, I decided to switch back to my normal Night Fury armor but I kept the chain sword equipped on my hip. Cowlson, Night Fury, I see you weren't exaggerating about the rat problem, he said and I simply nodded holding the cleaned skull of one of the biggest rats. He glanced at a question on his face but said nothing else as I held out a hand. He grasped it. Well, I wouldn't exaggerate about this problem especially in these circumstances since a group of over 30 of them ambushed me, I said getting a nod from the agent. Cowlson, what can you tell us about them? He asked and I gave him a quick but thorough description of the rats. As I did so more vehicles arrives and soon people in lab coats were setting up equipment and began examining the bodies and examining the area. Cowlson, I'm surprised you decide to call us instead of Monarch considering they're the monster wranglers, he said and I shrugged my shoulders. I did but they ain't be here for us since everything that happened in Japan so I contacted you guys next to get a hold of the situation before it got out of hand, I said truthfully and Cowlson nodded. Cowlson, so will you be joining us in this extermination job? He asked and I got another mission pop up in front of me. Mission, Rats in the Big Apple. Knowing this city had a rat problem you reasonably called some exterminators to deal with the problem. Help S.H.E.I.L.D. hunt and kill the mutant rats hiding in the city. Find and destroy 3 rats' nests. Capture 3 different rats alive. Reward. Positive affiliation with SHEILD. Positive affiliation with the citizens of New York. Accept. Y/N Chapter 110 Rats Attack. A few days later. POV, Max Draco, Water Elemental Clone. Location, New York. Yes, I just got back. Yes, Jean, I'll call you later. Alright, okay, I'll see you tomorrow, I said ending the call and dropping my backpack on the ground. Predator, so how are things? The fully transformed and armored clone asked sitting on the couch sharpening his wrist claws. Good, the original's life will be perfect when he returns to it, I said and briefly becoming liquid and reformed into a sitting position on the couch. What about the original hero work? I asked and the Yautja shrugged. Predator, been busy hunting rats throughout the city, he said and I gave him a look. Well, mostly I take down the occasional thug and lowlife, he said retracting the claws. How is the rat hunt going? I asked the Yautja clone but he shrugged and only now did I notice that he looked bored. Predator, same old with S.H.E.I.L.D, HEA.T, Monarch, and a few other organizations also hunting the beasts. It become tiresome, less of a hunt and more like a slaughter, he complained taking out another blade that I didn't recognize and began sharpening it. Which sword is that? I asked looking closer. It was a katana with a red blade. It looked familiar but I couldn't remember where I had seen it before. For a moment my fellow clone didn't answer, looking sheepish, but it was hard to tell since he still had the face of a Yautja. You know what I don't want to know, I said turning on the TV and was met with a scene of reporters in Mexico recording live. Rodin and Quetzalcoatl both flying in the sky over an active volcano. Predator, don't they just make a lovely couple? He asked and I shrugged as I changed the channel. So if hunting down these rats are so easy, why haven't you just wiped them out? I asked flicking through the TV shows. Predator, they're a good source PF points for me to use to buy supplies for my ship, he said and I nodded only for me to freeze at what I had just put on the TV. The TV show Central Park and people running as giant mutated rats chased after them. I looked to where my other was but he had already disappeared like he was never there. A part of me wanted to join him but it quickly disappeared as the orders from the original and common sense stamped down on the small part of me that was still human. I wonder if the original has these small parts of him that are still human, I thought as I called back Jean to see if she was alright. POV, Spider-Man aka Peter Parker. Location, New York, Central Park. You know, I knew the Big Apple had a rat problem but this is ridiculous, I said as I dodged the bite of a giant rat. Just as other rats started making their way towards us I dodged once more but this time I jumped over it, grabbed its tail and, hey, always watch your tail, I said as I spun on my heel and threw the rat into its friends and began trading them in a web. Help, somebody help. I quickly turned to see a woman carrying a child being chased by another giant rat but this one has no fur, a naked rat. I quickly leap forward and firing my webshooter just right I swing down grabbing both just in time before the rat's jaws clamp down on both of them. I got you, don't worry, I'm taking you behind the barricade, I said to the breathless civilian. It only takes a few swings and one final leap before we arrive. I land and many people notice but have no time to comment as they get to where they are needed. The two thanked me repeatedly and quickly run off into the crowd. As I stand there I feel the tension and adrenaline in my body decrease for just a few moments, and that's enough to tell me I need to keep moving or I'm not going to be able to move. I swing back into the thick of it looking for trapped civilians or large groups that can be dispersed or trapped. Just as I'm mid-swing my spider sense warns me just as a large shape jumps out of the tree I had attached my webline to. I barely managed to break the line and dodge rat and land on the side of one of the trees. I turned to see it was one of the skinnier rats. Its red eyes glared at me before it skunked away into a large group of rats. As I watched I was about to leap after it and the group when I got a call from my communicator. Spider-Man here, what's the situation? I asked as I began swing again. Robin, Spidey, it's Robin S.HEI.L.D has finished reinforcing all the north and part of the western part of the park, he began to say, only for me to hear an explosion. I dodged a rat that tried to jump and take a bite out of me. In return I gave it a black eye. Okay, though I think I sense a butt coming, I said as I spotted a man trapped onto a rock completely surrounded. Robin, sigh, but the east side is almost completely overrun and the pests have made it further into the city than we suspected. White Tiger is moving to reinforce Dagger and I got word that the thing moving to help as well, he said as I swung in kicking a rat getting too close to the guy. Just a second later a black whip wraps around the neck of another. I turn just in time to see Felicia land next to me while throwing the rat off the rock. Understood, me and Black Cat can hold the south, I said cutting communications as I garb the guy and we swing back. Just as we landed again I feel myself get that much more tired and I see Felicia give me a concerned look. Black Cat, I love the confidence but we are definitely going to need some backup, she said, and I had to agree. We just need to hold out until the immediate evacuation is finished, I said as suddenly a few blasts and a cheer went up and we both looked at each other and turned to look over the barrier of police cars and barricades. Out in front of the once endless onrushing attack of rats was now stopped and I saw what had stopped it. There stood a humanoid-like creature in futuristic white armor. Dreads hung from the helmet and two large cannons moved freely from its shoulders, and on each arm and in each hand was a weapon. And all around this figure was a pile of dead and decapitated rat bodies, some just missing their heads entirely, others just had a hole in their chests. For a moment I wondered who I was looking at until I saw the familiar emblem on the shoulder. Night Fury, glad you finally showed up, I shouted, and he turned gave us a thumbs up before leaping into the horde of rodents. Black Cat, well that should take SEPF the load off, she said, and I agreed as Night Fury tore apart the rats. Let's give him a hand, I said, and Felicia nodded as we both swung in. POV, Johnny Storm aka the Human Torch. Come on you dumb rats, follow me, I shouted out as I flew above leading a group of giant rats. I flew just above where they could jump and continued to taunt them. When all of a sudden a clear dome appeared around the group. I looked up to see my sister hovering on a disc. Susan, Johnny, don't taunt the rats, she said, but I shrugged and followed as she morphed the dome to create a sphere and lifted them up along with herself, and I followed along. It didn't take us long to arrive at the roof of the Baxter building, where 3 cages filled with rates and 1 empty one. Special delivery, I shouted down as Susan landed and dropped off all the rats in the cage. I landed as all the Monarch scientists got to work examining the new batch. I looked around for Reed only to see my sister hand on her communicator, a smile on her face. I gave her a look wanting an explanation. Susan, Night Fury has just arrived in the south helping Spider-Man and Black Cat, I nodded smiling too. Finally a heavy hitter arrives, I said, and Susan gave me a look. What? I asked and she just shrugged. Susan, you can get as hot as the surface of the sun and possibly hotter, and you don't consider yourself a heavy hitter, she asked raising an eyebrow. I waited a few moments expecting some kind of extra comment, but she didn't say anything else. Wait, do you mean? I asked getting a little excited, and she nodded. Susan, they could use the help AMD, we have more than enough specimens, she said, but gave me a worried look. Just be careful, all right? She asked and I nodded. As I run then jump off the building, I let the wind blow past my head as I feel the heat inside my body build up and spread through my body, and I shout, flame on. POV, Steve Rogers aka Captain America. My shield ricochet off 4 giant rats before returning to my hand. The stunned rats get gunned down just a moment later. I glanced to my left to see Natasha Romanoff aka the Black Widow holding her custom pistols, both having smoking barrels. Any news on reinforcements? I asked and Widow nodded. Natasha, S.HEI.L.D and the US military is mobilizing what they can, but it will take some time to get anything big here, she said just as a massive naked rat turned the corner. AD charged us. I readied my shield only for an arrow to come from above and hit square in the creature's eye before exploding. Natasha, Tony is on his way, but he's on the west coast at max speed. It will take him a while to get here and most of the Justice League are overseas, she said as I looked up to see Clint Barton rappelling down to meet us. Clint, the majority are still moving towards the Hudson on the major roads, but a few groups are taking the alleyways and tight corners, he said as S.HEI.L.D personnel began setting up around us. Natasha, Cap, got some good news. Night Fury and Johnny Storm have entered the fight, she said, and I nodded. Good, get Johnny to do crowd control, either turn them back or turn them to ash, I said, and Natasha nodded. Clint, what about Night Fury? he asked as he knocked a trick arrow aimed and fired it off into the distance. Knight Furus a wild card and a jack of all trades, best to let him decide where he's needed, so someone get him a communicator, I said as I watched another large group of rats in the distance. Just as I was about to give a order, a familiar roar came from the sky right before barrage of bullets, missiles, and red beams of energy. As the dust settled, all the rats had either died or retreated, though most had done the former than the latter from what I could tell as I and everyone around me looked up to see the source of the attack. In the sky right floating down towards us was a familiar suit of Iron Man armor, though this one was clearly far more heavily armored and kitted out with heavy ordnance. Thanks for the assistance, Lieutenant Colonel, I said as War Machine landed and the helmet plate lifted to reveal Tony's best friend's Rhodey's face. Rhodey, my pleasure, Captain, but please call me War Machine, he said as he reached out his hand, which I shook. So where do you need me? He asked and I nodded. We need you in the sky with Johnny Storm, keeping these things from getting any farther into the city, I said, and he nodded. Rhodey, consider it done, Captain, he said as the faceplate snapped shut. He gave a salute which I returned a second before he took off into the sky. Clint, get back up to the ceiling and keep your eyes in the alleyways. Natasha, go with him, I'll stay here, I said as I tightened the strap on my shield as more rats gathered and trampled Theo dead. Natasha, and what are you going to do? She asked and I smirked at her. What I always do, I said as the rats got closer and the soldiers around me opened fire. Hold the line, I said. POV, Hank Pym aka Ant-Man. Location, New York, Brooklyn. Finally it finished, my new suit is completed, I said as I backed away from the table it laid on. Unlike the original suit, this one was far more padded and resistant to cutting, tearing, and piercing, and allowed far more and safer use of the Pym partials than the original. The new helmet was also improved. It was far more sleeker and far more advanced than the scuba-like original. I let the feeling of accomplishment wash over me as I took a sip of warm coffee, only for that feeling disappear as the door to my lab be flung open. I was so surprised I choked on the coffee I had been drinking, barely managing to stop myself from dropping the cup. I turned to the door to see a upset Janet Van Dyne wearing the wasp suit. Janet, Hank, why aren't you suited up? We need to get to Manhattan now, she said, which confused me. Janet, what are you talking? I began, only to get untrusted as the many windows shades opened, letting light into the dark barley lit lab. I squinted my eyes, but as they adjusted I looked across the East River and saw giant and multiple smoke stacks rising in the distance. I didn't even hesitate as I grabbed my new suit. In just a few minutes we were both flying over the East River, Janet with her wings and me riding on the back of Anthony with a swarm of flying ants behind us. POV, Wally West aka Kid Flash. Location, Central City, Missouri. I walked down the short path to my front door, my mind a daze and consequently my body was sluggish as school had been, like it always is, a complete snooze fest. I dug in my pockets for my house key and opened the front door. Mom, Dad, I'm home from school, I shouted out, but I got no reply back. I looked around for a moment when I saw the knot on the fridge and saw a note tapped to it. As I read the note a smile grew on my face and all the boredom of the school day disappeared, and in the blink of an eye I set up the table in front of the TV with a plate full of snacks that only a speedster could enjoy. I began sipping on my soda as I turned on the TV, only for me spit out the mouthful of cherry soda as I saw gigantic rats terrorizing the streets of New York. I quickly got up and checked my phone and saw the 17 missed calls from R, and I physically cringed. Oh, he is so going to kill me, I said as pointed out my costume ring and quickly put on my costume and activated the communicator in my ear. Robin, kid, I know. We need you in New York now, he said, breathless as I had low growling and high-pitched screeching. Be there in a flash, I said, and heard an audible groan in my ear just before the communicator's link was cut. POV, Max Draco aka Night Fury. Location, Nighthawk Island. Current transformation, Zilla Jr. I laid on the warm sand letting the sun's rays hit my scales and dorsal scales. I adjusted and itched my nose, and as I shifted I felt multiple things on my back shift as well. Max, you might want to know that New York, specifically Manhattan, is currently being overrun by giant mutated, possibly Titan rats. Aren't two of my clones in New York? Can't they handle it? I asked. Shift back to where I was and I once again felt multiple things on my back move with me, with soft giggling with it that caused me to smile. One is in combat with the rats, but the other is pretending to be you as a civilian, and from what I can tell the rats just keep coming. I let out a sigh that caused a mini sandstorm on the beach and I opened my eyes. Well, guess my break is over, I thought as I began to stand up and I felt the multiple weight tumble off my back. I looked down to see all my kids tangled together in the sand, all fully in their monster forms. I smiled as they chirped at me. Just behind them in the forest I saw my two other clones at the edge of the trees. They nodded and I nodded slightly at them and started walking into the water. The Atlantis, the cold water woke me up fully and I quickly made my way back to New York.